The restaurant lights shimmered like diamonds caught in amber. It was one of those fancy uptown spots, half jazz bar, half fine dining experience, where the air smelled like expensive wine and polished oak. The waitstaff wore pressed black uniforms, each smile rehearsed, each movement silent choreography. Among them was Amara, a young black waitress with a soft voice, a heart-shaped face, and eyes that had learned to hide pain behind a professional smile. She'd only been working there for 6 months, but she was already known for her grace under pressure, though few knew what that grace had cost her. Amara wasn't just serving food that night, she was serving dreams. Every shift meant more money saved, more security, more distance from the poverty she grew up in. She'd come from the south side of Chicago, raised by a grandmother who used to say, "Baby, dignity don't pay the bills, but don't ever sell it cheap." Amara lived by that. She worked hard, kept her head down, ignored the snide comments, the subtle stares from some customers and coworkers who couldn't hide their prejudice behind politeness. But tonight, something felt off. Her manager, Ryan Kellerman, had been watching her more closely than usual. Ryan was in his mid-40s, a man who dressed too well for someone managing a restaurant. He had charm, but the wrong kind. The kind that made people laugh while they looked for an excuse to leave the room. Rumor was, he had connections that kept him in power even after multiple complaints from female staff mysteriously disappeared. Amara had learned to avoid him, to time her breaks, to always stay near other employees. But tonight was different. The restaurant was hosting a private party for elite guests, lawyers, investors, and political figures. Every table was full, every tray heavy. And among the crowd, one man stood out. He was sitting in the back corner, away from the spotlight. A dark suit, no tie, eyes hidden behind tinted glasses despite the dim lighting. His presence was quiet but commanding. The other guests gave him space without even realizing it. That man was Darius Stone, Amara's husband. But no one there knew. To the world, Darius was a ghost. Whispers called him the gentleman, a mafia boss who'd gone underground after dismantling 2 rival cartels without ever being charged. To Amara, though, he was just Darius, the man who brought her breakfast in bed, who read her poetry with a whiskey voice, who once said, "I may come from darkness, baby, but I'll burn it all before I let it touch you." He was there that night because Amara had mentioned the restaurant's event, unaware she'd be working it. He wanted to surprise her, watch her shine in her element. But as the night unfolded, his surprise turned into something far darker. Amara was rushing between tables, balancing wine glasses and laughter. Ryan intercepted her near the kitchen door, his voice low and sharp. "Amara, my office. Now." She froze. "I'm in the middle of serving table 7. He leaned closer. "Now." His tone left no room for protest. She followed, uneasy but obedient. He led her past the kitchen, through the back hallway. But instead of stopping at his office, he pushed open the door to the staff bathroom. Amara hesitated. "Sir, this isn't." "Relax," he said with a smirk. "We need to talk about your performance." Her pulse quickened. The hum of the restaurant seemed miles away now. "Can't we do this later? During shift review?" He blocked the door. "I think now's better." He stepped closer. She stepped back. His eyes were glassy with arrogance, his voice dripping with entitlement. "You know, Amara, a lot of people around here think you only got this job because of that pretty smile. Maybe it's time you showed me you can really earn your place." Her heart hammered. "Mr. Kellerman, please, But before she could finish, his hand grabbed her wrist. Out in the dining area, Darius noticed the sudden change. Amara had disappeared mid-shift. One of the busboys mentioned, Ryan called her to the back. Darius's jaw tightened. His instincts, honed from years in the underworld, told him something was wrong. He rose from his seat, moving silently, eyes cold and calculating. The music muffled his footsteps as he crossed the room. Inside the bathroom, Amara pushed Ryan's arm away, her voice shaking but fierce. "Let me go or I'll scream." He laughed. "You think anyone's gonna believe you? You're replaceable, sweetheart. One call and you're gone." Her fear flickered into anger. She tried to move past him, but he shoved her against the sink, his hand gripping her shoulder. The door handle suddenly turned. Ryan spun around just as it opened. Standing there, calm as a shadow, was Darius Stone. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Darius's face was unreadable, but his eyes, they burned like black fire. "Amara," he said quietly. "Step outside." Ryan straightened up, trying to sound confident. "Sir, this is private staff." Darius didn't move. "You're talking to my wife." Ryan blinked. What? Darius took one slow step forward. His voice dropped to a whisper that could slice glass. You have 10 seconds to explain why my wife looks like she's seen a ghost. Ryan scoffed. Look, man, this isn't what it looks like. She came onto me. You know how these girls can be. That was the last word he said before Darius's fist crashed into his jaw. The sound echoed like a thunderclap in the tiled room. Ryan hit the floor, dazed. Darius crouched down beside him, his tone as soft as it was terrifying. You made 2 mistakes. First, you touched what's mine. Second, you thought no one would find out. He stood up, helping Amara to her feet. Go outside, baby, call the cops. But she hesitated. Darius, don't, please. He gave her that same look he'd given years ago when he promised her safety. I'm not gonna kill him, he said. I'm just gonna make sure he never forgets why he shouldn't have tried. By the time the police arrived, Ryan Kellerman was sitting against the wall, alive but broken. He'd have nightmares about that night for the rest of his life. Darius vanished before they came, leaving no name, no trace, only a single calling card tucked into Ryan's jacket pocket. A black envelope sealed with a gold emblem, a serpent coiled around a rose. The signature of the gentleman. The next day, the story was all over the staff whispers, but no one dared report it officially. The restaurant shut down for renovations. Amara resigned, but deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Because Darius's world didn't just punish, it sent messages. And what he did that night had awakened sleeping enemies who'd been waiting for a reason to strike back. The storm was coming. The morning after the restaurant incident, the world outside Amara's apartment looked deceptively calm. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, painting warm stripes across her skin, but her heart felt heavy. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ryan's smirk, the bathroom walls, and Darius's silent rage. She'd married a man who could silence an entire room with one look, but now that quiet power scared her. Darius had come home just before dawn. No words, no explanations. He kissed her forehead, told her to rest, and disappeared into his study. Amara sat up in bed, listening to the sound of his measured footsteps, slow, deliberate, too calm for someone who'd just beaten a man nearly unconscious. When she finally gathered the courage to peek inside his office, she saw him sitting at his desk, staring at a small velvet box. Inside was an antique gold ring, engraved with the serpent and rose emblem, the same symbol left on Ryan's jacket. Around it were stacks of old photographs, newspaper clippings, and faded notes marked with names. He looked up when she entered. You couldn't sleep, he said, his voice low. No, she whispered. Neither could you. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There are things moving again. Things I thought I buried. Amara stepped closer. You didn't kill him, right? Darius shook his head. No, but I might as well have signed his death warrant. What do you mean? He leaned back, lacing his fingers together. Ryan Kellerman wasn't just some sleazy manager. He's the nephew of Senator Roland Kellerman. And that senator, he's been laundering money for Vincent Morrow. Amara froze. She'd heard that name before. Vincent Morrow, the head of the Morrow Crime Syndicate, one of the most violent and politically connected groups in New York. Darius continued. Morrow's been trying to pull me back into the game. He wants my networks, my reach. When I said no, he went looking for leverage. I guess he thought humiliating my wife would make me bend. Her stomach twisted. So Ryan was a setup. Darius nodded once. A test. They wanted to see if I'd react. And now they have their answer. 2 days later, the retaliation began. The first warning came quietly. Darius's car, a black Maserati, was found torched in an alleyway. No one saw who did it. The second was louder. His accountant, a quiet man named Ellis, was shot in broad daylight while jogging in Central Park. The third was unmistakable. An envelope left on Darius's doorstep, containing a photo of Amara taken the previous night, walking home from the grocery store. Amara's hands shook as she stared at the picture. They know where I live, Darius. They're watching us. He took the photo, his expression calm but his jaw tightening. Then they've already made their first mistake. That night, Darius made some calls. He reached out to people he hadn't spoken to in years. Men with names like Victor Cruz, Mikhail Orlov, and Juno, a hacker who lived in the shadows of the dark web. These weren't friends, they were ghosts from his old life. And when Darius Stone called, ghosts listened. Gentlemen, Victor said over the encrypted line, you sure you want back in? You left this behind for a reason. I'm not back in, Darius replied. I'm cleaning house. Dash dash dash. Meanwhile, Amara tried to hold on to normalcy. She went to work at a smaller cafe, hoping distance would bring peace. But one evening, as she was locking up, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. The same one she'd seen 2 days in a row. She called Darius immediately. They're watching again. He arrived in minutes. He walked up to the SUV, no weapon, no backup. The tinted window rolled down. Inside sat a man with a scar running down his cheek, his smile oily and cold. "Evening, Mr. Stone," the man said. "Vincent sends his regards." Darius didn't blink. "Tell Vincent I'm not interested in his greetings." The man chuckled. "He figured you'd say that. So he told me to give you something else." He tossed a small USB drive onto the pavement and drove away. Back home, Darius plugged the drive into a secure laptop. A video began to play. It showed Ryan Kellerman, his face bruised, sitting in a hospital bed. Then a voice off camera spoke. "You think you can touch one of ours and walk free? You've forgotten who runs this city, Stone. You may call yourself the gentleman, but soon, we'll show everyone what happens when manners meet power." Then the video cut to black. Amara covered her mouth. "Darius, they're threatening us." He stared at the screen for a long time before saying softly, "No. They just declared war." Dash dash dash. That night, he opened the vault under his office floor. Inside were weapons, handguns, cash, old passports, and a small wooden box containing a silver rosary. Amara watched silently as he loaded the gun, the weight of what was happening pressing down on both of them. "I thought you were done with this," she whispered. "So did I," he said. "But the past doesn't let go, Amara. It waits, it watches, and when you forget it, it knocks on your door wearing a familiar face." She stepped closer, touching his arm. "I married Darius Stone, not the gentleman." He looked at her then, eyes soft but unyielding. "You married both, and right now, the gentleman is the only one who can keep you safe." Dash dash dash. The next day, Darius vanished again, but not without leaving Amara protected. His men began to appear in the shadows, one at her workplace, another at her apartment building. She didn't see them, but she felt them, a silent net of loyalty spun around her. At the same time, Darius went hunting. He started with small targets, bookkeepers, drivers, low-level enforcers linked to Vincent Morrow. He didn't kill them, he bought them. Fear and loyalty were two sides of the same coin, and Darius knew how to flip it perfectly. Within a week, he had maps, names, and a trail leading to a luxury yacht docked on the Hudson River, the floating fortress where Vincent Morrow conducted his business meetings. That night, the city lights glimmered like broken glass as Darius approached the dock. He wore a black suit, no tie, no weapons in sight. Just confidence, the kind that made bodyguards hesitate before asking questions. Inside the yacht, laughter and jazz filled the air. Morrow was hosting a private poker game, surrounded by senators and investors. When Darius entered, the music faltered, conversations paused. Vincent Morrow looked up, surprised but amused. Well, if it isn't the gentleman himself. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Darius poured himself a drink from the bar without asking. "To send a message." Morrow leaned back, smirking. "You already did that when you broke my nephew's jaw." Darius took a slow sip. "That wasn't a message. That was restraint." The room went still. Even the sound of the ocean outside seemed to fade. Morrow's smile hardened. "You think you can walk in here and—" Before he could finish, the yacht's lights flickered and went out. A second later, the giant screens around the room lit up, showing footage of Morrow's secret accounts, offshore transactions, and politicians he'd bribed. Every name, every number, every signature. Juno's voice echoed through the yacht speakers. Compliments of the gentleman. When the lights came back on, Morrow's face had turned pale. Darius placed his glass down gently. "You came after my wife. You made it personal. So now, I'm taking everything you built, and I'll make it mine before sunrise." He turned to leave, but Morrow shouted after him. "You think this ends with data? You can't erase blood." Darius paused in the doorway. "No, but I can control who bleeds next." Dash dash dash. By dawn, Vincent Morrow's empire was in chaos. Accounts frozen, partners defecting, his political protection gone, but Darius knew better than to celebrate. Because men like Morrow didn't die quietly, they exploded. That evening, Amara's cafe exploded. The blast shattered windows for 3 blocks. Amara had left just minutes before, thanks to a flat tire that delayed her. When she heard the news, her knees gave out. She called Darius, sobbing, "They're trying to kill me." He was already on his way. When he arrived, firefighters were still putting out the flames. He wrapped her in his arms, his face unreadable. But his silence spoke volumes. Morrow had gone too far. And Darius Stone, the man who tried to live clean, the man who built a new life, was gone. What remained was the gentleman, reborn in fire and vengeance. That night, he met with his old allies in a dim warehouse lit by a single hanging bulb. Victor, Mikhail, Juno, and 2 others sat around a metal table. Victor said, "You know, once this starts, there's no going back." Darius nodded. There never was. He laid out the plan. A 3-day operation to dismantle Morrow's syndicate from the inside out. No blood unless necessary. Precision, not chaos. Fear, not fire. But Amara, listening from the shadows, knew there was one thing Darius hadn't planned for: what revenge would do to him. She'd seen the darkness in his eyes before. It was how she'd found him years ago, standing in the rain after burying his brother. She feared that this time, he wouldn't come back from it. Still, she didn't stop him. She couldn't, because in that moment, she realized something chilling. Sometimes, love doesn't save a man, it gives him a reason to go to war. As the chapter closed, the city's underworld whispered again. The gentleman was back, and this time, he wasn't playing defense. The war began at midnight. Every alley, every hidden dock, every silent phone line in New York buzzed with one name again: the gentleman. Darius's network, rebuilt in weeks, moved like a ghost army. Trucks vanished, money trails burned, and men who once whispered Morrow's orders now whispered Darius's instead. For 48 hours the city's underworld convulsed. Amara watched it all from the safe house Darius had built long ago in Harlem. From the small window she could see the skyline flicker red with distant fires. She wanted to believe this would end soon, that once Morrow was gone her husband could finally stop. But the look in Darius's eyes when he left that night told her otherwise: calm, focused, dangerous. The look of a man who'd accepted every consequence. At 2 a.m. the phone rang. A voice she didn't know whispered, "He's coming for you." Then the line went dead. Moments later, the lights went out. The abduction. The door burst open before Amara could reach the panic button. 2 men in masks stormed in, grabbed her, bound her wrists, and dragged her toward a waiting van. She fought, screamed, but the cloth over her mouth smothered the sound. As the city lights streaked past, she caught a glimpse of a tattoo on one man's wrist, a serpent crushed beneath a boot heel. Morrow's symbol of victory. When the van stopped, she was pulled into a warehouse smelling of rust and salt. There, under a single hanging bulb, sat Vincent Morrow himself. His tailored suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, but his grin was intact. Well, he said softly. The queen without her king. Amara glared at him. You think this will make him stop? No, Morrow said. It'll make him come. And when he does, the gentleman dies. He motioned for his men to leave her tied to a chair in the center of the floor. Keep her alive, he ordered. I want him to see her breathing when he kneels. The gentleman's move. At 3 a.m., Darius's convoy disappeared from the road. His men waited for orders that never came. Then, through their radios, a single phrase crackled. Stage 2. I'm going in alone. He'd traced the kidnappers through a GPS chip sewn inside Amara's locket, the one he gave her on their wedding day. It pulsed now on Juno's screen, a red dot hovering over the docks. Darius, Juno warned through comms, it's a trap. All traps are, he replied, and cut the line. The rain was coming down in sheets when he reached the warehouse. The world outside blurred into a dull roar, thunder rolling over the river. Darius stepped through the open doors like a shadow carved from smoke. Inside, 20 guns turned toward him. Vincent Morrow clapped slowly. You never learn, Stone. 1 man against an army. Darius smiled faintly. You should have brought more. Then the lights went out. Juno's digital sabotage plunged the building into darkness. Silencers coughed. Flashes sparked. When the backup generators whined to life, half of Morrow's men were on the floor. Darius moved with surgical precision. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Years of buried instinct roaring back to life. He reached Amara, cut her ropes, whispered, run when I say. But before he could finish, Morrow emerged from behind a steel column, gun raised. Move, and she dies. Amara froze. Darius slowly lowered his weapon. The standoff stretched long enough for thunder to fill the silence. Morrow sneered. All the talk about honor, and you still end up crawling back to the gutter. You should have stayed dead. Maybe, Darius said. But you should have stayed scared. A sudden crack echoed. The bullet wasn't from Morrow's gun. It came from the catwalk above. Victor Cruz, loyal to the end, had followed orders to stay away, then ignored them. Morrow's pistol flew from his hand as Victor's shot shattered his wrist. Darius charged. The two men collided, fists and fury crashing like the storm outside. Years of hatred condensed into seconds of violence. When it ended, Morrow lay gasping on the wet floor, Darius's blade at his throat. Amara's voice cut through the rage. Darius, don't. He hesitated. Every muscle screamed for revenge. Every ghost from his past whispered, finish it. But her voice, steady, trembling, human, pulled him back from the edge. He stepped away. You'll answer for what you've done, he told Morrow. Not to me, to the world you thought you owned. Victor tossed him a phone already streaming live. The camera panned across Morrow's face, the weapons, the money, the hostages. Within minutes the feed hit every major outlet, every politician's inbox, every corrupt cop's nightmare. The gentleman didn't kill his enemy, he exposed him. Aftermath. By sunrise, federal agents swarmed the docks. Morrow was in cuffs, his empire crumbling. Darius and Amara watched from the roof of a nearby building as helicopters wheeled overhead. You could have killed him, she said quietly. I would have, he admitted, if you weren't here. So what now? He looked at her hand in his. Now I disappear for real. He left everything, money, networks, names, funneled it into charities under aliases. Within weeks, the gentleman became a myth again. Amara reopened a cafe in a small coastal town far from New York. Some evenings, a tall man in a gray coat would help her close, never staying long. Locals thought he was just a quiet traveler. Only she knew the truth. The storm had ended, but its memory would always hum beneath the calm. Epilogue. The final letter. Months later, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a single line written in Darius's hand. Greater than, peace is not the absence of war, love, it's the choice to walk away while you still can. Folded within was her locket, the tracking chip removed, the photo of them on their wedding day untouched. Amara smiled through tears. Somewhere, she knew, he was finally free. And as the camera of our story pulls back, rain whispering over the sea, lights dimming one by one, you hear that voiceover meant for every listener across the US and UK. Greater than, if this story shook you, if it made you believe that even in a world built on power and revenge love can still rewrite the ending, subscribe now. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing a man can do, is choose peace.